Welcome to Quality Quest TV. I'm Jennifer, a certified lead auditor with over 12 years of experience working closely with organizations on audits, process excellence, and continuous improvement. On this channel, we break down standards like ISO, CMMI, ITIL, not as theory but through real situations from IT operations and software teams. We have already explored up to ISO 9001 Clause 5 leadership, and today we move into Clause 6, that is planning. This is where quality stops being a document and starts becoming a way of thinking. We look at real examples from IT operations and software development so you can actually see how Clause 6 works in practice. Let's begin. Let me tell you two real stories, not from movies, not from imagination, but from the real corporate world. In 2012, Knight Capital was one of the biggest trading firms in the world. Trusted, respected, powerful. One morning, they deployed a small software update, just one. But someone forgot to remove an old piece of test code. No risk assessment, no rollback plan, no proper change validation. Within 45 minutes, their system started placing thousands of wrong trades. By the time they realized what was happening, $440 million was gone. The company never recovered. Not because the engineers were bad, not because the technology was weak, but because planning was missing. Now rewind to 2017. Equifax, one of the biggest credit reporting agencies in the world, they knew about a software vulnerability. A patch was also available, but it was never applied. There was no ownership, no follow up, no risk evaluation. Months later, 147 million people's personal data was leaked. Lawsuits followed, trust collapsed, over $1.4 billion in losses. Not because they didn't have policies, but because they didn't plan their risks. Here's the uncomfortable truth. These companies didn't fail because of hackers or bad luck. They failed because planning was treated as paperwork instead of protection. And this is exactly why ISO 9001 Clause 6 exists. Clause 6 doesn't talk about documents, it talks about thinking ahead. It asks, what could go wrong? What opportunities are we missing? What happens when we change something? And most importantly, are we prepared before damage happens? That's what we are breaking down today. Not theory, not jargon, but real life planning that saves careers, companies, and credibility. Let's first understand what Clause 6 really means and why it's the backbone of every successful organization. Clause 6 is not about documentation. It's not about formats, templates, or Excel sheets. Clause 6 is about thinking ahead. It asks one powerful question. Before something goes wrong, are you ready? ISO 9001 divides this thinking into three simple but powerful parts. The first part is Clause 6.1, which is risks and opportunities. This is where you pause and ask, what could go wrong and what could go right? Not fear based thinking, not over analysis, just awareness. In IT, this could mean a dependency on one cloud vendor, a key person holding critical knowledge. In product teams, it could mean feature failures, customer trust erosion. Clause 6.1 ensures surprises don't destroy you. The second part is Clause 6.2, which is quality objectives. This is where planning becomes measurable. Not vague goals like let's improve quality, but clear ones like reduce incident resolution time by 20%. Clause 6.2 asks, what do we want to achieve? How will we measure it? Who owns it? Without this, Teams stay busy but directionless. Third and the last part is clause 6.3, that is planning changes. This is the most underestimated part. Every organization changes. There are new tools, new people, new processes. Clause 6.3 asks, before you change anything, have you thought it through? Because unmanaged change is where chaos begins. Think of clause 6 like this. Clause 6.1 asks, what could happen? Clause 6.2 asks, what do we want to achieve? And clause 6.3 asks, how do we change safely? Together, they turn chaos into control. Now that you understand what clause 6 is really about, let's zoom into clause 6.1 risks and opportunities in detail. ISO 9001 says, when planning the QMS, the organization shall consider internal and external issues and the needs of interested parties and determine risks and opportunities. In simple words, clause 6.1 is asking three quiet but powerful questions. What could go wrong? What could go right? And what will we do about it before it happens? This is not about panic. It's not about predicting the future. It's about thinking before reacting. Imagine this. You are running an IT support operation. Dashboards look green, SLA reports look fine, your team feels in control, customers are mostly happy. Then one quiet afternoon, your main service provider goes down. At first, it feels minor, a few alerts, a few complaints. But within minutes, tickets start piling up. Your team starts panicking. Clients start asking questions you don't have answers to. And suddenly, everyone is reacting instead of responding. Now, here's the turning point. Someone in the leadership team pauses and says, this isn't just an incident, this is a risk we should have planned for. That's where clause 6 steps in. The real issue wasn't the outage, it was single vendor dependency. Everything was built around one provider, one failure point without any backup plan. Instead of blaming teams, they asked, what if we use this moment to become stronger? What if this outage becomes a turning point, not a disaster? They didn't rush, they didn't plan. Um, First, a secondary vendor was onboarded, not rushed, evaluated properly. Then, failover testing became part of quarterly routines, not just a document but a real drill. And finally, all of this was integrated into ITIL processes, their change management, incident response, communication flows. It was no extra work, just smarter work. The next time something broke, there was no panic, there was no chaos. The system adjusted automatically. Teams stayed calm. Customers barely noticed. Audits no longer felt like interrogations. They felt like conversations because the system worked even under pressure. That's the power of Clause 6. Not paperwork, not fear, just thoughtful planning that protects people, processes, and performance. So now you have seen what happens when risks are identified early and when teams stop reacting and start thinking ahead. But here's the truth. Even the best risk planning means nothing if people don't know what they are working towards. Because once the chaos settles, a new question appears. Okay, now what exactly are we trying to achieve? This is where most organizations quietly struggle. Not because they don't work hard, but because they work without direction. And that's where clause 6.2 comes in. ISO 9001 never says just have goals. It says set objectives that guide behavior. Real objectives don't sit in PowerPoint decks. They shape decisions even under pressure. They must be measurable, aligned with policy, relevant to customer satisfaction, communicated clearly, reviewed regularly, because vague goals don't create results, they create busy teams. Now imagine a service manager saying, "We need better service quality." Everyone agrees, everyone nods, and then what? Nothing changes. Because no one knows what better actually means. Now compare that with this. 95% of incidents must be resolved within 4 hours. Suddenly, everything shifts. Priorities become clear, escalations are faster, ownership is visible. The team introduces AI based ticket triage, dedicated L2 support, monthly performance reviews. Dashboards start turning green, leadership stops firefighting, customers stop complaining, and for the first time, the system feels calm. Now let's move into a product team. Their objective becomes reduce defect leakage below 2% per sprint. Just one sentence, right? But it changes everything. Developers slow down on purpose, peer reviews become meaningful, automated tests stop being optional, sprint retros shift from blame sessions to honest conversations. Because now the goal is clear. Everyone knows what success looks like. Clause 6.2 doesn't push people harder, it aligns them. And when people are aligned, quality becomes natural, not forced. And once objectives are clear, the next question becomes what happens when things change? Because change is inevitable. And that's where clause 6.3 steps in. Every organization changes. There are new tools introduced, new processes, new structures. Change itself is not the problem. The problem is unplanned change. Clause 6.3 asks one simple but powerful question. Before you change something, have you really thought it through? Imagine this. A company decides to move to a new service management tool. The old one feels outdated. The new one looks modern. Leadership wants speed. So they switch overnight without pilot, without training, without any backup plan. Within hours, things start breaking. Tickets disappear, SLAs collapse, customers complain publicly, support teams scramble, managers firefight, trust starts slipping. And here's the truth, the tool didn't fail, the planning did. Now rewind the story. Same organization, same tool, but this time they pause. They define the purpose of the change. They assess the impact on people and processes. They train the team not once but properly. They line up vendor support. They assign clear ownership. Then they pilot the change with small group in controlled environment and safe learning. What's the result? There is no downtime, no chaos, no panic, just a smooth transition. Teams feel confident, leadership feels in control. Now let's look at a product company. Their leadership announces we are moving to safe. Overnight, teams panic, velocity drops, meetings multiply, morale sinks. Why? Because change was announced but not planned. This time they slow down, they clarify the purpose, they explain the why, they define roles clearly, they appoint an RTE, they launch a pilot art. Instead of chaos, there is coordination now, and instead of resistance, there is alignment. Clause 6.3 isn't about stopping change, it's about making change safe, intentional, and human. Because when people understand what's changing and why, they don't resist it, they support it. And when risks are understood, objectives are clear, and change is thoughtfully planned, quality stops being a struggle and starts becoming a habit. Clause 6 connects three powerful ideas. One is awareness, understanding what could help you or hurt you. Second is direction, turning intention into clear, measurable objectives. And third is managing change without chaos, that is control. Together, they form something powerful. It's not control, but confidence. It's not bureaucracy, but clarity. It's not reaction, but proactive readiness. And this is why Clause 6 matters. Because once planning becomes intentional, everything else in ISO starts to fall into place. In the next video, we move to clause 7, that is support, where we explore how people, tools, and knowledge turn good plans into real results. If this video helped you see clause 6 a little more clearly, if it made planning feel less heavy and more human, then share it with someone who's navigating quality, someone who might need clarity instead of pressure. And if you are enjoying these deep dives into ISO, where we talk about real work, real people, and real decisions, you're always welcome to subscribe.